everyone, I'm Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Animal Sanctuary, and welcome to Cornsnake Corral for Thursday, December 8th, 2022. In my experience with the 14 corn snakes that we've worked with here at Behavior Education, they really have temperament differences from fearful and shy all the way to bold and confident. We're going to look at 3 learners today. This first one is Tuvoc, and I would label him as fearful. And yes, that is just a label, but I'm basing that label on a behavioral suite that includes things like hiding a lot, being slow to investigate novel objects, and the fact that he's been with me 3 years and he's still not shifted out of his habitat. He has learned target training very well over the years, and he's very confident now targeting in known locations within his enclosure. He will not hesitate to target out of hiding. He will not hesitate to target all around inside his enclosure. And I've been working with him lately to try to get him to target out of his enclosure. And as you'll see in this session, he starts out really strong. So he is confident now in certain contexts, and he's not fearful now within certain contexts, that being his known environment and his habitat. I wanted him to shift out onto the station, and he just wasn't going to do it. So I shifted him to his right, my left, onto a ledge, which is part of his normal enclosure furnishings. And you can see that he's very focused and he's very willing to shift over to his ledge. He came out of hiding, he shifted out the door, and then over to his ledge, and he takes the reinforcer. Now I left the door open to give him a chance to acclimate to this environment at large. And then when I was ready for his second repetition, he was still on his ledge, and now I thought I would get him to target over to the station, because my ultimate goal is to get him to voluntarily shift from his enclosure to a station or other temporary holding area. He's yet to do that. He has come out of his enclosure one time in 3 years and explored an activity station, and he's only done it once. But I think that as time goes on, as he gets older, he will continue to gain confidence, but he is just one of those particular individuals that just is not that curious about novel objects and not very confident at exploring novel environments. You see that when he got to the activity stand, and he did make it all the way over there, and he started to investigate that he backed up. And so I paused, and then I re-engaged with him to try one more time. And I could tell that he's just not going to do it. He's just not confident enough. He's just not comfortable enough to shift completely out of his habitat onto that activity station. Now remember, that station has different smells than he's used to, different textures, different looks than he's used to. So I paused again, re-engaged with him, and then decided to have him target back onto and across his ledge. It's a known location. This context is familiar to him, and you can see that he's targeting very well. So the issue is not with him targeting. It isn't that he doesn't understand the targeting behavior. It was just that his lack of confidence to move out onto the station outweighed his confidence in targeting, and it outweighed his motivation to follow the target to earn reinforcement. So I will just continue to work with him as he gets older, and over time he should continue to improve. Our next learner is Nissa. She's about the same age as Tuvoc, and she's always been a little bit flighty. So if you notice, she immediately darted out of her enclosure as soon as I opened the door, but then she lost focus on what was going on. And this is pretty typical of her. She starts following the target immediately and quickly loses focus. She's not really afraid of the activity stand. I think that with Nissa, she just can't maintain long-term focus on the target. And I also think what happens with her is she realizes she's in a different environment, a different location all of a sudden. She comes out so exuberantly and so ready to engage and likely eat that before she knows it, now she's in a strange location. And so now she feels less confident, and now she feels nervous, and she loses engagement with the target. And I tried to get her re-engaged with the target, and she looks at it a few times, but she just keeps turning away in the opposite direction. And she looks down the holes in the activity stand, and she ultimately ends up getting underneath the plexiglass door. I think what she was trying to do was go back to her enclosure, but she didn't realize that that transparent barrier would prevent her from going directly back in. And she couldn't get in her enclosure from under the door. And I was trying to target her back on top of the door, and it just wasn't working. So I ended up feeding her down there near the floor, and she did take the food and eat it. And so after she was done eating, I thought maybe she would be more calm and more focused, and I could target her back out from underneath the door and onto the station, and then on top of her door and back into her enclosure. But she kind of struck at the target once or twice. She engaged with the target, but then lost focus and went the opposite direction. I think at this point she's nervous. She wants back in her enclosure. This is all out of context for her. And I really wanted to get her on top of the plexiglass door and not below it. But every time I tried to get her to engage either with the target or with the food, she just wasn't going for it. And I think at this point she has herself in a frenzy because she's realized she's far away from her enclosure. And so I ended up just sliding the activity stand out from under the door so that I could pick her up and put her on top of her enclosure door. Now you see all of a sudden she's behaving much more calmly. And she's not darting into her enclosure. She's just calmly moving back in there. And that's why I say that she is a flighty individual, but at times she's exuberant too. So it is almost like within this individual snake, she has this conflict going on between I'm suddenly very bold and exuberant and I go for stuff, but then once I do that, I realize I'm in over my head and I don't like where I am. And now I'm scared and now I'm nervous and I just want to go back to my enclosure. So she went back into her enclosure and I was kind of looking to see where she went. And she went into that black plastic hide. So I waited a few minutes and then I came back. I shut her enclosure. I left the room and I came back and she was out of her hide, ready to engage again. So she targeted out of her hide very quickly and she exuberantly jumped at the target and took the food and then snatched it back into her hide. So this wasn't really calm behavior. She did the behavior, and I think this is indicative of her personality. She jumps into action and does a behavior, but she does it super quick to get it over with, and then she goes back to where she's comfortable. So whereas I think Tuvoc has a lack of confidence and he's generally fearful, but when he's engaged in an activity, he tries to concentrate and remain focused. Nissa has some competing emotions going on where she's very excited to engage, but then she's not very confident and she jumps into action, realizes she's in a situation she's nervous about, and so she gets it over quickly and goes back to her hide. Now, this is Sunda. Sunda is a very focused individual, and it's surprising because I didn't raise her from a baby. Got her when she was older, and she's about 6 years old now, I think. But you can see that she's very focused. She's very confident. She is one of my corn snakes that does this complete shifting behavior almost 100% of the time, out and then back into her enclosure. And she remains focused on the target, and she has shown me that she can generalize the targeting behavior because she has escaped from her enclosure, not this particular enclosure, but a different enclosure. And I have used the target to get her out from underneath where she has been. So in other words, I have used the target to literally recall her when she has gotten out unintentionally, and it's worked very well. So for whatever reason, even though she was older when she began her training, she has taken to the targeting very well. She is able to generalize the behavior to different contexts and different environments, and she is very reliable. Almost 100% of the time, she does the behavior that I'm asking her to do. So she targeted out, she ate, I cleaned her enclosure, and now I'm asking her to target back in. And if you follow the channel regularly, I know that you've seen her do this numerous times. I always default to her as an example when I want to show a near perfect or a perfect shifting behavior because she does it almost 100% of the time. She shifts out, she shifts in. Now this time I ask her to shift up and over a branch I have in there and then come down the other side. She did that, no problem. So she also exhibits patience. Now she'll occasionally nose bump the target throughout this process, but I still feel like as a corn snake, she does extremely well because I don't find that corn snakes have a lot of patience or a lot of focus. They can be kind of flighty and they can lose focus easily. I think Sunda does an extremely good job every time I ask her to target. And she does an excellent job at understanding what this behavior means to the point where she can generalize it to different contexts and different environments. And I just thought it was absolutely fascinating that she's eating hanging down over this branch. And then she had the wrong end of the mouse, so she let go of it a couple of times trying to find the head. And then once she finds the head, she kind of dips down into the water. And at some point, she is partway submerged in water and partway hanging on this branch. And I also think that that is just incredible, and it shows the great diversity that corn snakes have as far as being able to adapt to different environments. They can swim, they can climb, they can spend time terrestrially, but they can also spend time in trees. And I think that that makes them a pretty fun species to observe if you get one that is confident.